Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles, Director of Partnerships here at Sweetfish Media. I am joined today by Matt Weil. He is the VP of Sales at Highspot. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Logan. How are you?
I am doing fantastic, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We're going to be talking about 4 specific ways that sales leaders can grow high growth sales teams and some of the lessons learned that you're going to share today. Before we dive into that, I would love for you to share with listeners a little bit about your background, your journey in sales leadership, and what you and your team are up to at Highspot these days.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. I'm very excited to be able to do this. So I'm an old guy. I've been in sales for doing this for about 25 years, and I have a reputation going into startups or new divisions of bigger companies and scaling them for organizations. And so I've done this 6 or 7 times, and it's a lot of fun. I'm definitely a guy that doesn't like to tinker. I like to get in and really sort of play with the engine and grow as fast as we can, and hopefully please the board and the investors. So I've had that opportunity to do it in the B2B side. Typically, before I came to Highspot, my last job, I had typically done it in the security space, in the cloud security space. My previous job before this, actually, I did a full change. I went into the B2C space for 4 years and scaled a company for an IPO, and then wanted to come back to technology and was able to get introduced to Highspot, which hopefully we'll be able to talk about. But yeah, so it's been a fun 25 years, and I wouldn't change anything for the world.
I love it. So I know as we were talking a little bit offline, Matt, you mentioned that one of the things you wanted to talk about was investing in sales enablement. And there's actually a story there in why you chose Highspot. I'd love for you to unpack that for listeners a little bit, because I think that's a great point to kick off, since you wanted to talk about, the role sales enablement plays in scaling a high growth sales team.
Yeah, definitely. And it also lead into what Highspot does. That's great. I was not seeking a role in the sales enablement space when I was looking for my next opportunity. And when I got introduced to our CEO, culture was always my first. And I think that's also one way to scale a great organization, is really focus on culture. So new companies is always culture is what I focus on. And I knew right away that Highspot had really thought about that. And when I got to see in my second call with our CEO, Robert, got to see our product, 10 minutes into the phone call, I said, we can stop right now. I completely understand what you do. I will buy your product wherever I go next. And hopefully it could be at Highspot, but wherever I go, I will purchase Highspot. And the reason why and what Highspot does is that we're an end-to-end sales enablement platform. And why I was so excited selfishly for me is what Highspot does for the end user, being sales and salespeople, is it gives them the tool to be able to access all the marketing, product, now enablement, training materials in one place. They don't have to go into SharePoint or Drop or Google or look at thousands of emails to try and remember when somebody sent something to them. They now have this one place that's dedicated to them. That think about how easy it is to search on Amazon for a new TV or whatever it is you're looking for. It's that easy to search or filter in Highspot. And now salespeople have access to all this, and it works where salespeople works. It works in CRM. It works in their email. So we're not asking salespeople to do something different. It just works where they work. But they also get to do the same thing when engaging with their customers, and they get to be able to then share with their customers the experience they're having, and they get to track all this engagement. So it stopped that big fighting between sales and marketing, saying stop building these decks that don't mean anything, and marketing saying, what do you mean? We these are supposed to be what everybody loves. You now get all the analytics on what people are looking at. And so it allows us no more fighting between sales and marketing, which I tend to have for my last 25 years. And at Highspot, that doesn't happen because it's all the analytics are there, all the data. So 70% of assets that marketing is building or product is building for sales is not used. Highspot will call out what is not being used, and you can focus now your time and energy on what is being used.
Yeah, I think you touch on something really applicable there, Matt. We've had folks talking about sales and marketing alignment on the podcast in the past, and that seems to be a common source of friction. Marketing is producing content that sales can't use or doesn't want to use, or they don't have ease of access to be able to use. So I love the point that you make there and how sales enablement plays a role in that sales and marketing alignment. One of the other areas that there's probably some friction that you've seen in being in the sales leadership space for a while is that, you have young reps that are used to sales enablement tools, and you've got maybe older reps who aren't used to it. How do you kind of bridge that gap as you try to get, one team kind of rowing in the same direction to the same rhythm?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, we have a lot of young sailors where we're at, or at the Highspot, and they now don't know a world without enablement. And so it makes it easier for us to be able to bring them on, and they love having these tools. We actually had a recent customer where their average seller had been in the business over 20 years. And at first, they were looking at all enablement tools, Highspot and other readiness products. They were really trying to bring new technology in. But their biggest concern was, were their people going to adopt? And so if companies do have sort of tenured salespeople, the first is you really want to look at the adoption rate that those vendors you're talking with, and what are they really seeing? And then if they have adoption rate by demographics, it's really important. This one customer, coming back to this story, was they actually did a POC with us. And during the POC, that was the complaint, that their salespeople didn't think they were going to want to use it. But as they got deeper into the POC, they realized, my gosh, my life is easier. The time I'm saving is so much better. And actually, they had 100% adoption in their first 6 weeks on the product. And the key thing is that they actually took the time to understand what their sellers wanted. They listened to them, and they just didn't force it on them. And I think that's also what makes them really important when you are building out these enablement teams, is you listen to your salespeople. You don't assume what they want. You listen to what they want, or they really won't adopt the tools that you want to bring to them.
Yeah, I love that point of not force feeding a tech stack. Salespeople, marketers, it doesn't really matter. Going back to your point of, the advantage of, any sort of tool that gives you one place to go, doesn't change your workflow, but allows you to make it more efficient, especially for folks, these days we've got so many distractions and so many tools to use. We need to simplify things. So on that note of simplification, one of the things that you mentioned in your experiences of building teams, Matt, is working out a sales process or a playbook early on. But however, that might not be as simple as kind of set it and forget it, right?
Yeah, no, it's really, I think that's one of the key things that I've learned selfishly for me, that when I go into an organization, the first thing I do is I listen to, whether it's go to a lot of face-to-face meetings or listen to a lot of phone calls, to understand the experience that currently the company is giving to their customers, but also what does that process look like, whether it's a win or actually, more importantly, in the losses. So you can really hear, what are the objections, how many calls or meetings do you have to have, what are the type of questions customers are asking. I also then focus on, hopefully you can go to a business that has some good reps that are performing so you can at least learn. And then you sort of make some bets and you sort of decide, okay, this is what our process is going to look like now. You identify some key KPIs to be able to measure that process and success. And then you slowly grow, but you're always going to have to change this. Just in the 10 months that I've been at Highspot, I don't know, we've done it 3 or 4 times. And these aren't huge fundamental changes, but they are changes that the market's changing, in the enablement space. Enablement leaders are becoming more prevalent in businesses. We have to rethink how we're selling to them. Budget process changes. All these things are changing. So you have to be willing to call an audible. Mm-hmm. If you put a stake in the ground and think that's the way you're going to do it till your next fiscal year, you're going to
mm-hmm.
fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on that note, Matt, of, calling an audible or not getting stuck with a sales process or a playbook that is quickly outdated because of things that you're noticing in conversations between your sales team and clients or things in the market that are causing shifts. Are there some tactical ways you've found to kind of synthesize all of that information to put it in one spot? Is that always a checklist item on a monthly, all sales hands meeting where you're talking about the overall process and making tweaks to that? What are some of the ways you've found to make sure that you're getting all that shared collective knowledge of those little bits that should be informing the way that you tweak the sales process and morph the sales playbook as you continue to go?
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit of everything you just described. It's, you use good old fashioned work where, technology, it's not the answer. And that's just talking with your reps and mm-hmm. listening to what they're going through. There are some, Highspot is one tool that we're using to measure, what are people looking at and what's the engagement and what's important. There's other technology tacks to listen to phone calls and monitor and coach. There is not just one blueprint for every company, but for us, mm-hmm. we have identified some key performance indicators that we want to make sure that we're tracking properly. We communicate those on a monthly basis. And if we see something that's just doesn't smell right, we'll investigate and probably pivot. Mm-hmm. And even though our sales cycle is, about, called 4 to 6 months, mm-hmm. we can still see that these things are happening. And my last job, our sales cycle was 7 to 14 days, and we were pivoting all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, again, you have to be nimble, and you really have to listen to the pulse of what's going on there. And a lot of companies just look at the successes. I think mm-hmm. the failures probably teach you more.
All right, today's growth story revolves around search engine marketing, and we'll be shining the spotlight on Aegis Software, a company that makes software for manufacturing operations. Aegis was one of the first companies in their space to invest in search marketing, but as competition grew, their performance plateaued. To counter this, they hired Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. With unparalleled experience in inbound lead gen for B2B companies, Directive was able to increase Aegis's monthly online leads by 457%, while at the same time lowering their cost per lead by 147%. Now I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Are there certain KPIs that you've found, you make a good point that it's a little different for every company, but do you find that there are some historically held KPIs that are touted as the end all be all of whether we're heading in the right direction as a sales team or not, that maybe aren't the ones you should be focusing on, or an example where you were focusing on certain KPIs and kind of ditched them for other indicators as you continued this process of tweaking the sales process for an organization as you were going, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, if we could spend hours talking about this one. I think that is there one secret KPI? I would say opportunity to close, but that's there's so much more in the weeds than that. Mm-hmm. I would say the most important thing that I have learned is you've got to look at the cohort data. And that is something that I have learned the hard way in a previous role, that you got to make sure you're looking at not in period data, but cohort data, no matter what the KPI is, because mm-hmm. there's such a moving target. So again, this is probably much bigger broader conversation. I'm sure a lot of people have an opinion, but I wouldn't say there's a magic bullet, but I would only look at cohort data going forward.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So I know you also wanted to touch on, Matt, investing in sales ops as you analyze and understand what are the KPIs that are going to be most important in your given situation. Tell us a little bit about some of your lessons learned there on the ops side.
Yeah, I think it's very important. Actually, in a Highspot, we're actually rethinking what sales ops is and calling it growth ops, because it's not really truly sales ops anymore. It's marketing, and it's BDR or ADR, whatever each company calls it. There's so many other departments that people touch. So we're actually calling it growth ops. And I think a really good growth ops team, first of all, just keeps you honest on your North Star, but also if they're really good, can sniff out and get ahead of the things we've been talking about. If your conversion rates aren't looking great, or if there's something that's not right in the sales process. And my previous role, I had an unbelievable ops team, and we were dealing with such high volume and short sales cycles that you literally can hurt your business if you weren't willing to look at the data. But you can slice and dice data any way you want it. So you have to be really all agree to a common language and all agree to what the data is going to explain, because marketing could look at a data very different the way that sales looks at it. And if you have a really good growth ops team, they're going to make sure that everybody's looking at it the proper way.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Well, Matt, I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with our audience, and, having both B2B and B2C experience in scaling high growth teams. Obviously, all of that experience lends itself to a unique perspective. If anyone listening to this, Matt, would like to stay in touch with you or follow what you guys are doing at Highspot, reach out, ask any follow-up questions of you personally, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Yeah, the best way is probably my LinkedIn profile, Matt Weil, Weil, and that's probably the best way to find me. And I'd be more than happy to talk with people and help them.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today, Matt, and sharing some lessons learned with our listeners today.
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. All those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.